themselves, where does garbage like this come from? Where does this kind of just sheer stupidity come from? And well, one need not really look too far. Don't have to look too far at all. In fact, you can take a look at one of the articles that was released on October 4th in the Springfield News Leader. SPS asks for at least $170,000 to search for critical race theory records sought by Missouri lawmaker. $170,000 to search for critical race theory records? Well, we saw that one, and it's complete and utter BS. So, who's the lawmaker? Well, it's probably this guy, right? Craig Fischel, State Rep 136. Turning challenges into opportunities for Springfield. Maybe he should have looked up Juneteenth and kind of figured out what the history was there. I don't know, but let's continue. So, a local lawmaker has made an official request for Springfield Public Schools to search 3 years worth of email and other documents for any reference to critical race theory and 21 other trigger words or phrases. State Rep Craig Fischel filed the far-reaching Sunshine Law request in early September. District responded to provide the cost for searching, copying, and redacting an untold number of public records. The district requested a deposit of at least $170,000 to start searching different servers. Final cost, including any copying, redaction, were expected to be higher, although the exact amount was unknown. Fischel, a Republican from Springfield, alleged the districts used worst-case scenarios to inflate the cost of fulfilling the requests. Really? Bro, that's a worst-case scenario for even making the request. Are you out of your mind? But again, I digress. Factoring in, as according to a press release sent September 28th by the Missouri House. Great. So the whole place is into it. Factoring in estimates for copying and redacting, he projected an initial $194,324 price tag. Parents in my district and across the state have a right to know what's being taught to their children in our public schools, and our school officials have an obligation to be transparent and forthcoming with this information, Fischel said in the release. Now keep in mind, this is the same place where they had the big meeting about critical race theory, its benefits, its follies, and the whole meeting was held by white folks. So that's a thing. That's a thing. My request is a simple one, and is designed to ensure that controversial topics aren't being taught in our schools without parents being aware. Controversial topics? You mean history, bro. You mean history. What is controversial about history? Okay. So let me just give you one man's opinion, one Asian man's opinion who went to school in southern Missouri. Okay? Who was born and raised in the Ozarks and had an education here in the sticks of southern Missouri. Okay? The only reason, and again, we learned social studies from an early age. I mean, this was American history was like a fan favorite of most, at least from my experience, of most of my social studies teachers. We had a few that talked about world history, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, all that. But for the most part, it was all American Civil War. That was like the focus, right? Every one of these schools that, at least back in those days, every one of these schools, their history teacher was also, history social studies teacher was also a football coach. And a lot of them were very much interested in going over the Civil War and American history specifically. So, that was something that was taught. But, let me be the first one, just in case you never heard this before, let me be the first one to tell you the only reason that we learn about Lebensraum when it comes to World War II, and that the story of Manifest Destiny are taught that they're different, is because over here, it actually worked. And by worked, I mean there was an actual genocide of millions of people, and they were displaced from their land and moved, and then the Nationals moved in, and that's where we're at today. Okay, so I mean, that should not be controversial. That Manifest Destiny and Lebensraum are the exact same thing. It's history. It is what it is. Facts are facts. You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Manifest Destiny was actually one of the leading proponents as to why, the NSDAP thought that Lebensraum would be, an acceptable policy. Now look it up. Don't believe me. I'm just some guy in a hoodie. But I digress. So let's jump back here. This summer, the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education sent a survey asking each district to report if it used critical race theory or the 1619 project in its classroom. Springfield and the vast majority of districts reported neither was being taught in class. The only exceptions were in Kansas City, Hazelwood, and University City. News leader obtained the Sunshine Law request official filed on official letterhead. The Superintendent Granita Latham, as well as the district's initial response September 13th and a lengthy itemized response September 20th. That response, which we are providing in its entirety, makes it clear that we are willing to work with representative official to understand and fulfill his request, said Stephen Hall, as Chief Communications Officer for the district. As currently drafted, the request is extraordinarily broad in scope. It has the potential to divert hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of district staff time to search and review thousands of pages of documents. Right, because it's incredibly idiotic. It's incredibly broad because it's based on nothing. I mean, this is very much like, this is about as goofy as the Arizona, voter fraud investigation where they were looking for bamboo, and it turns out, well, you know what the results were, right? But that's not good enough for some folks either, I guess. During the past school year, allegations surfaced that the district's embedded critical race theory, which examines systemic racism in U.S. institutions, and its mandatory equity, diversity training for staffs and teachers. The allegation prompted dozens to address the school board, as well as 2 protests and a lawsuit filed by 2 employees. Lathan, who joined the district on July 1st, said in August that critical race theory is not being taught in our classrooms. Official, who is married to a retired Springfield teacher and has grandchildren enrolled in the district, requested school officials search all documents related to its teachers and staff, plus training and curriculum. And they got a fun list here of some of the terms that they want these folks to dig through all these, bajillion documents for. So let's go over some of this. So critical race theory, or critical theory, right? 1619 project, long-form journalism project to examine the impact of slavery and contributions of African Americans. Black Lives Matter. Okay. What? All right. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're not supposed to teach that in school? I mean, what the hell is that? Culturally responsive education. Implicit bias. Intersectionality. Systemic racism. Restorative justice. Whiteness, white privilege, and white fragility. It's white fragility that makes this a thing in the first place. Oppression matrix, oppressor, oppressed, spirit murder, anti-racism or racism, collective guilt, affinity spaces, disparate impact theory, colorism, microaggression, social justice, culturally responsive curriculum scorecard, teaching tolerance. Bruh. If school's not teaching tolerance, let me tell you, I went to school here in Missouri, in southern Missouri, in the 1990s, and tolerance was definitely something that was not taught. Okay, I personally saw on several occasions some of these little, well, lack of a better way to say it, some of the folks who were now police officers and, lawyers or whatever, honestly, some of them who were high school coaches in communities around the area also, very much who should have been taught tolerance, firstly at home, but secondly at school, because these little racist jagoffs were definitely involved in things that the school should not have put up with regarding bullying, and regarding bullying based solely upon race. So if you think that's a bad thing to be taught in school, tolerance, you know, forget all the rest of this stuff. Forget all the rest of this political stuff and whatever, you know, the left, the right, the. If you think that not teaching children tolerance is a bad thing, I mean, I have lived through the intolerance in the school systems here in Missouri personally, and I can tell you, it's definitely something that they need to be putting a little more focus on for the sake of people of color. Learning for justice. Okay, he also asked for all documents and materials from or related to the Pulitzer Center, the Zion Education Center, Southern Poverty Law Center. Official asked that the copies be sent to his office in Jefferson City. He asked the district to waive any fees for locating and copying the materials. I respectfully request expedited processing of this request. Yeah, sure. That's why you made such a broad request there, guy. The district noted in a response dated September 13th that it did not receive officials' request until September 8th. Board Secretary Tammy Harrington, the custodian of records, responded that the request will require the district to search all of its servers for any reference to many trigger words or phrases. She noted the following will need to be searched: staff Google Drive, Canvas learning management system, district file shares, district email servers, and local computer files. The Sunshine Law requires a government entity, when possible, to use the employee making the lowest hourly wage to search and copy public records. The Missouri Supreme Court also recently ruled that public bodies cannot charge for time attorneys spend redacting documents requested under the Sunshine Law. So, you know, it just continues from there. Absolutely ridiculous request from Representative Craig Fischel from District 136. You know, I have no words. Because, again, this is something I know a lot about from personal experience, and it's disgusting. It's absolutely just horrifying that someone would be so callous and so incredibly stupid. But if you're wondering where, you know, somebody like the outlaw Josie Wales gets their mindless garbage to post something like this, you know, in the Facebook marketplace in the first place, and, you know, on some of the old local yard sale pages, actually spam this out, you know, I will say this: thank goodness to the good folks who actually do live down here. And this is, again, coming from a person of color who was born and raised in this area. Especially thanks to white folks who stood up against this clown and basically called him out on his incredible stupidity. Not only for posting something, you know, egregiously misleading, but also, well, you know, just for coming out and making the reference. Now, there were a ton of comments on some of these posts, and some of them were shameful and stupid. Others were, again, that's the kind of thing that makes me proud to be from here, because despite all the garbage that's going on out there, and despite all the incredibly just ignorant, racist, you know, that we have to you know, consider our neighbors, there are a lot of really good and intelligent and got with it folks who live down here in the Ozarks, and they're the only reason that I am even still here, keeping it real. So if you personally were standing up for injustice, and standing up against just sheer stupidity, I commend you. You're awesome. But I'll leave you with this. This is part of LBJ's speech when presenting the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He said, you know, it's not just Negroes. I love the vernacular of the time. But really, it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice, and we shall overcome. As a man whose roots go deeply into Southern soil, I know how agonizing racial feelings are. I know how difficult it is to reshape the attitudes and the structure of our society. But a century has passed, more than 100 years since the Negro was freed, and he is not fully free tonight. It was more than 100 years ago that Abraham Lincoln, great president of another party, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But emancipation is a proclamation and not a fact. A century has passed. more than 100 years since equality was promised, and yet the Negro is not equal. A century has passed since the day of promise, and the promise is unkept. The time of justice has now come, and I tell you that I believe sincerely that no force can hold it back. It is right in the eyes of man and God that it should come, and when it does, I think that day, right in the lives of every American. Again, not my favorite Democrat president, but good words, man. All right, we're going to take a short break, and we'll have more after this.